House Education will come to order. The clerk will take the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Bertolio. Here. Representative Lakakos.
Here.
Representative Essman.
Here.
Representative Isley.
Here.
Representative Lynch.
Here.
Representative Deming.
Here.
Representative Seekins-Crow.
Here.
Representative Elverum.
Here.
Representative Thane.
Here.
Representative Strand.
Here.
Representative Tillman.
Here.
Representative Overstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Romano.
Here.
Vice Chair Gregg.
Here.
Chair Exton.
Here. Education meeting. I want to give a few announcements. I didn't do this last time, but I would like to. Please silence your cell phones. If you must take a call, please step outside of the committee room. If you wish to give testimony, please sign in at the door. Do we have such a sign-in sheet? Okay. Providing your name and affiliation. Please note that the information in your testimony is a public record. The following bills have been scheduled for hearing today: House Bill 15, 67, and 24. So I'd like to start right away to hear House Bill 15. So, Representative, would you like to present your bill?
Chair Exton and members of the committee, for the record, my name is David Beatty, representative of House District 86, which is comprised of Hamilton and the immediately surrounding area. This afternoon, I bring before you House Bill 15, a bill that applies statutorily determined inflation adjustments to the funding formula for K-12 base aid, where the acronym BASE stands for Base Amount for School Equity. Article 10 of Montana's Constitution stipulates that the legislature must fund and distribute in an equitable manner to the school districts the state's share of the cost of the basic elementary and secondary school system. Title 20, Chapter 9, Part 3 of Montana Code Annotated comprises the body of law by which we provide the funding necessary to fulfill this specified constitutional duty. House Bill 15 adjusts for inflation the formula that is used to calculate the minimum level of funding for each school that each school district must receive to support its general operations, as well as the portion of that amount that is to be provided by the state and the amount that must be provided by each district via a non-voted property tax levy. The inflation adjustment to be applied is calculated per 20-9-326 MCA, which specifies that the inflationary adjustment for each year in a biennium be based on the compound annual growth rate of the CPI over the prior 3-year period, with a cap of 3%, that is to say not to exceed 3% each year. Per this statute, the inflation factors for the upcoming biennium are 3% for both fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027. A school funding bill like HB 15 comes before each legislature. I urge you to act on this bill expeditiously, as has been done over the past 3 sessions, so that the school districts across the state can get on with budgeting for the next school year. Chair Rexton, this concludes my opening statement on House Bill 15. I stand ready to answer the committee's questions.
Thank you, Representative Beatty. Could we have proponents for this bill? Please state your name, spell your name for the record.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Emily Dean, spelled D-E-A-N. I serve as the Director of Advocacy for the Montana School Boards Association. Today, I am also speaking on behalf of the Montana Rural Education Association and the Montana Association of School Business Officials. They could not be with us today. You'll also be hearing from other members of the coalition during the proponent testimony. We are very appreciative to the sponsor for carrying this bill and his thorough presentation. We are here in support of HB 15. Consistent with previous sessions, as the sponsor noted, HB 15 is one of the most crucial bills of this session for schools, and we are grateful that the 69th legislature is continuing a tradition of prioritizing this bill. We also hope that the bill will experience similar overwhelming support as it has in previous sessions. This bill provides for the present law-based inflationary adjustment for schools and assists in ensuring Montana's public schools can maintain learning opportunities and school operations while serving students. HB 15 is a fundamental part of meeting our constitutionally guaranteed obligations to students, and we respectfully ask for your support in HB 15. We are available for questions, and we do have the MTSBA staff here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Another proponent?
Thank you, Chair Rexton. For the record, my name is Rob Watson. That's W-A-T-S-O-N. I stand today with school administrators of Montana to support this bill. We thank Representative Beatty for bringing this bill early in the session. One thing that's just to note, bringing this bill early allows schools to plan their budgets for next year, which is really important. In this day and age, all of us are in hiring mode in the spring, and the earlier we can figure out our budget for next year gives us a better shot of hiring early in the spring. Since there's limited applicants these days for teachers, competing for teachers early and bringing them to Montana is important for all of us. So having this funding bill decided early really does help that process. In addition, we also appreciate that the funding bill has increases to all the other elements, all the other budgetary elements, including special education. We realize that that hasn't always been the case, and we appreciate the fact that now when we talk about inflationary increases, it also includes special education. So for those reasons, we support this bill and we encourage you to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Another proponent, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Doug Reisig, last name spelled R-E-I-S-I-G. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Quality Education Coalition. I should just say whatever they said, I support. I'm not going to go back through it, but just to let you know that in my 110 schools and all of our statewide education advocacy groups that belong to MQEC, there are very few bills that come before discussions that we have that are in unanimous agreement. This is one. We really need it, and we do appreciate Representative Beatty bringing it forward. HB 15 is needed by the schools, so please support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reisig.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kim Popham, spelled P-O-P-H-A-M. I'm the MFPE Director of Public Policy and Research. I'd like to thank you and the bill sponsor for your work to improve the public schools of Montana. We appreciate the inflationary adjustments suggested in this bill as our schools desperately need them, as everybody else has said. As you know, over the last few years, the rise in inflation has made basic services and necessities more difficult to access for many Montanans, and it's hit our public schools and their staff particularly hard. The adjustments proposed in this bill are a great start. There's still a big gap, though, and our schools need more. I look forward to working together to ensure that our public schools gets the funds necessary to continue to develop innovative programs to help our students. MFPE and our members stand in support of this bill. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rixton and members of the committee. My name is Susie Hedlin, H-E-D-A-L-E-N for the record, and I'm honored to be your Superintendent of Public Instruction. I want to thank the committee and Beatty for advancing this legislation as a priority. This is crucial for several reasons. By implementing this inflationary increase, we can ensure that we have the essential standard to maintain education that our children deserve. Furthermore, advancing this bill reflects our commitment to supporting public education, and as a practitioner coming from the field, I know how important the budget sheets that OPI provides to our schools on March 1st are, and if we are able to have the numbers properly coming from this legislation, we can do a lot of our school planning and get ahead of, as Dr. Watson said, our hiring processes, our negotiations, planning for major maintenance, and all of the critical work that needs to be done in schools. So if we have these numbers at the OPI, we'll be able to give those preliminary data sheets to the districts so they can do the important work they need to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Bob Story, Montana Taxpayers Association. Some may wonder why we would stand in support of an increased spending bill, but we do. We believe it's the necessary thing to do and the right thing to do. You know, about 20 years ago, the state lost a lawsuit on how schools should be funded. It didn't fund them adequately and didn't have a definition of what the basic system was supposed to be. And so around 2005, the legislature spent a lot of time developing a definition that's in statute of what a basic education is, and then they developed funding formulas that would fund that to comply with the court case. Now, the court had a list of, 70-some things that the state needed to do, and one of them was funding. And one of the things on that list was the court thought there should be a self-executing inflation adjustment to the school funding formula. The legislature never thought that was a good idea because, first of all, it binds the hands of future legislators, and secondly, you never know what kind of money you have to work with. And so that's why you see a bill like House Bill 15. You have to go in the statutes every session and change those A and B numbers and the base entitlement numbers and all the other numbers that are in there, so that when you stack them all up, as your staff has probably explained to you, how you get to a maximum budget. That gets there, but it still leaves the legislature with some control over how much increase you're going to give to schools through the formula. If you have your fiscal note, I just want to point one thing on the fiscal note at the very end. If you go to the very bottom of the fiscal note, local impacts, there will be some local property tax impacts due to your actions that increase the amount of school budgets. That's just the way it works. Now, I think people that understand it better than I will tell you that just because you put 3% on the base, that not all schools get 3% on their total budget because they have to vote to get some of that extra money, and some of you understand that. But anyway, we support the bill and hope you move it forward. When I was in the legislature, a lot of times this was the last bill that came through. Mm-hmm. You were in the end of April before schools knew what their budgets were. So it has to happen. Just we'll get it in a mix and get it rolling.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any proponents online? I think you're muted.
Madam Chair, we do have one proponent online. Her name is Rose Bender.
Rose, can you hear us?
Thank you. Yes, Rose Bender, representing Montana Budget and Policy Center. We do support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the only proponent online?
Madam Chair, yes.
Okay. Do we have any opponents? Do we have any opponents online?
Madam Chair, we do not.
Do we have any instructional, what do we call it? Informational witnesses.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Paul Taylor. For the record, that is Taylor. I am a budget analyst with the Office of Public Instruction and may be able to help with questions associated with this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Questions for the committee, from the committee? Vice Chair Romano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Taylor.
Madam Chair, Representative Romano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Taylor, I am curious if you know the answer to this question. So I'm aware that the inflationary increase is capped at 3%, and it's formulaic based on CPI, and for the biennium, it's 3% and 3%. I'm wondering if you could tell us what the actual was.
Actually, I can if you'll give me 1 second to get my cell phone.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other?
Oh, sorry. He's getting his.
Okay.
He had a slight delay.
Being drawn into conversations.
I had to run for safety. Yes, Madam Chair, Representative Romano, should the inflationary value under 20-9-326 not have been capped, the actual rate was calculating at, for FY 2026, 5.67%, and for FY 27, it is 4.83%. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Do we have any other questions from committee? Representative, hold your card up. Isley. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, I'm not sure who to ask this. Maybe the bill sponsor might know. Chair, Mr. Beatty, I'm wondering, we've talked about, and this was mentioned, that, the cap is at 3%, but then there's a mention that 3% isn't totally from, say, the state, but some of that comes from local property taxes. So I'm wondering if you know what the breakdown is of that.
Madam Chair, Representative Isley?
Yes.
So I think that's the 3% we're talking about here is applied to the various factors in the school funding formula. And I wish I had brought my list together to show you exactly how that works out. But what it does is then it affects every factor. The factors are then applied to last year's numbers. You generate a number for a given school district, and then you calculate it once you know their A and B. So now you come up with the base budget, the minimum budget that must be applied. So of that, and I think I'm going to probably defer to Mr. Taylor because it's Friday and my memory is not serving me very well. But of that base budget, Mr. Taylor, if you could just tell me exactly which portion of that is local. And there's a caveat here, because the amount of local taxpayer responsibility, which is calculated by the formula, can be offset by guaranteed tax base aid, which is additional state aid. So unless I know the exact district we're talking about, I can't tell you exactly how those percentages work out. Mr. Taylor, if you could give a generic answer to this.
Yeah, there's 3 components that you want to look at. There's the
Mr. Taylor, could you just could step to the podium so we can hear, all of us can hear you?
Madam Chair, Representative Isley, this is interesting. I don't think we've ever quite done it this way, but certainly there's 3 components that, so some of the base aid components are 100% state paid, and there's others that have components that are shared responsibility between the state and the local property taxpayer. So three of them, these are the three that are shared. The per A and B component and the basic entitlement are shared, that the state pays 44.7%. The remainder isn't up to 100% because base is 80% of those amounts. So 35.3% to get you to the 80% is the responsibility of the local taxpayer. The third component that has a local impact is the special ed allowable cost payment. The state pays 100%, but in the base area, the formula mandates an additional 40% that is the bearing of the local taxpayer. Now, I say those are the bearing of the local taxpayer. That's not 100% true. And Representative Beatty alluded to this somewhat, that area that is the local tax burden summed together, we call the GTB area because that's the portion that is applied to the calculation of what allows for additional property tax relief through mill equalization called guaranteed tax base aid. So when Rep. Beatty said you have to know exactly the school district that's being discussed because each school district represents varying taxable wealth when compared to the statewide average. Each one would garner additional state support and adjust the total amount of property taxes independent of every other district. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Clear as mud.
Madam Chair, if I might also elaborate on this. Obviously, this is complicated, and I regret that I did not bring my own copy of this, but I would be happy to provide a copy to your clerk of an Legislative Fiscal Division two-page handout that shows you exactly how the components stack up. But essentially what it does is it takes all the verbiage in the bill that you see here and replicates it in a graphical manner, which after you see it, it'll still be complicated, but at least more understandable. So if Chairman or Chair Rexton, if you would so desire, I will make that available so that the next time you meet, you may provide that as a handout to your committee.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Representative Beatty. And I've been here 3 sessions. I've been a superintendent quite a spell, and I still have to work at understanding some of these formulas. So we're not expecting you to understand all of that, but there are enough resources around here that can help you understand school funding, and they do numerous workshops on it. And I think there may be some online in our legislative portal that you can look at. So I highly recommend that you do so because it is very complicated. So thank you, Representative Beatty. Representative Thane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I might just break in and offer a suggestion to the committee. Pat McCracken and Julia Patton do a great presentation that actually has visual representation of the elements of school funding, and I would suggest this committee might benefit from inviting them to do a brief overview for us. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Thane, and I concur. I will speak to them about that. I think that would be very, very helpful, especially for our new members. Thank you. Any other representatives have questions? Representative Deming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Mr. Taylor. Sorry to keep calling you back from the back of the room.
Madam Chair, Representative Deming.
Madam Chair, Mr. Taylor, so I don't pretend to understand all of this, but I do pay attention to the inflation rate. So our cap is 3% per year, right? And then you alluded to some other figures. I don't hear very well either. So what was the inflation rate later?
I have to run it from my cell phone again. Does it? Yeah.
Okay. You got it. All right. So what's the first, excuse me, Madam Chair?
Through the chair.
What's the first figure for inflation the first year?
5.67.
Follow up?
Madam Chair, Representative, 5.67%.
Okay. Follow up? So how is that calculated? Where does that number come from?
Madam Chair, Representative Deming, there is a section of law, it's known as 20-9-326. And in that section of law, it refers, or it describes a formula. And the formula goes to a particular consumer price index. And the consumer price index looks at the year 2 years earlier than the first budget year, and compares it to the CPI index of the year 2 years earlier to that year. And we're looking at an increase over a 3-year span. So there's a formula in statute that refers to a particular CPI for determining these inflationary increases.
Thank you. Madam Chair, another follow-up, is that okay?
Follow-up?
So the CPI is at the published federal number, is that correct? And then, of course, the rest of the formula is based on the CPI, okay?
Madam Chair, Representative Deming, that's correct.
One more.
Follow-up?
So this CPI that comes from the federal government, and then the formula is based on that particular CPI. Do we know over the past, say, decade, if that CPI has actually been accurate? Because do we know if that's going to be the number? Because we're basing a lot of our decisions on that particular number, and I'm not sure it's always been that accurate. In fact, I think it might be low, to be honest with you. But
Madam Chair, Representative Deming, there has been an analysis that's done that's going to be referred to through the LFD's analysis during the HB2 subcommittee for Section E. And the posted information actually shows the CPI over a series of years. As far as have we done formal analysis measures to assure that the legislatively made permanent CPIs are following that of what the actual economy is doing, I don't know that that formal analysis has been actually accomplished. Okay. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I? One sec. Additional.
Yes.
I understand that there's been discussion about ways to educate yourself about the general fund funding formula. I'd like to make one more selfish plug. On the Office of Public Education's website is a document. It's titled Understanding School Finance. It's in the school finance area of our website. You would go to the OPI website and just type in the search box, Understanding School Finance. It seems like a dry read, but it's really rather beneficial. So, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Yes, Mr. Alvarum.
Madam Chair, I have a question for Mr. Taylor.
Madam Chair, Representative Alvarum.
Madam Chair, Mr. Taylor, historically, in years where the CPI has been below 3%, has there been an effort to catch up? My assumption is that they fund below the 3%. Has there been any effort to catch up?
So, Madam Chair, Representative Alvarum, the legislative body has a responsibility for determining the approved CPI that will be put forward. The statute that is in question, the 20-9-326, is a requirement of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to put forward a budget to the governor that is in compliance with that particular rate. The rate that the legislature then applies is the full discretion of the legislative body. There have been instances in which we've had economic downturns in which various things have been done to help assure that there's enough funding associated with the funding formula for education. For example, one biennium, we took the two CPIs, or the legislature took the two CPIs and flipped them so that we could find a way to assure that there was enough revenue available. So, I'm sort of getting out of my particular area, but there has been various things done over time that are not exactly in compliance with the requirement of 329 because the legislature can make a decision other than that of what is required of the Office of Public Instruction to place into the governor's budget. Has there been an attempt to catch up? I don't know that has been done, but I can't really say with certainty.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Follow-up?
Are you able to provide some data as to historical trends of the CPI that you present and the funding that's been approved by the legislature?
Madam Chair, Representative Elvorm, yes, I do have a historical document of what the legislature has approved in comparison to what the CPI calculated, and I will provide that to the staff of this committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other representatives have questions? Okay. Representative Beatty, would you close on your bill?
Thank you, Chair Rexton. I think they were excellent questions asked during the course of this, and I'm going to take an opportunity during my closing to address a few of the questions here and elaborate on a few things. First of all, with respect to the CPI that is used for this calculation is developed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's a July 1st value. You have to pick a point in time. I have no reason to think that these are not projections. These are calculated after the fact and are sometimes adjusted later, as Representative Deming has suggested. But I don't see any reason to suspect that these CPI numbers should be suspect. It's a little more speculative when we're talking about projections looking forward. And if you're taking a look at projections looking forward, right now, according to the latest statistics that we're using at Legislative Fiscal Division, or our Legislative Fiscal Division is using, for 2026, the projected inflation rate is 2.44%, and for 2027 is 2.35%. Less than the cap, of course. However, if you go back a couple of years, you're going to see that the inflation was significantly higher than the cap. This is an artifact of the calculation, which is looking back 3 years. So we have a bubble in inflation that occurred in 2022 and 2023 that it will carry forward and manifest itself in the calculation as we move forward. Earlier biennia, for instance, in 2024 and 2025, for those fiscal years, the calculated value took into account much lower inflation values. And so you end up with a bubble. In a stable inflation environment, this isn't a problem, but when you have spikes in inflation, it does create a problem. It creates a shortfall of a calculated value that is greater. I got to get myself straight on this. Let's just say actual inflation is greater than the calculated value. But as you move through time, you'll get to where we find ourselves, what we're projecting to see in the next biennium, where the actual calculated values, I'm going to go through these again, 5.67 and 4.83 respectively for 2026 and 27, are significantly higher than projected actual inflation. So what does all of that mean? This is what you get if you have a formula that is trying to average over a 3-year period. With respect to the catch-up question, now the how far we are behind in inflation is somewhat debatable because the basic entitlement or the basic funding that we do for K-12 aid is only a portion of the aid that the state provides schools. I mean, we have other programs, advanced opportunities, and various facility programs that aren't included in this. But, my rough calculation, and I'm ready to have Mr. Taylor or Mr. Melton jump up and tell me I'm crazy on this, I think that at the end of this biennium will probably be, based on the numbers I have, be about 10% behind. However, There is legislation under development now, legislation that you will eventually see. It's referred to in the press because it's already public knowledge as the STARS Act, which is a significant injection of funding into the funding formula. It actually makes a slight modification of the funding formula and will have the effect of accomplishing the catch-up that you alluded to. Now, with that being said, I want to reiterate what we heard from a number of different proponents here. Our schools depend upon understanding this information, knowing what the inflation factors are going to be so that they can do their budgeting for the following year, which, as Mr. Taylor will tell you, is no easy task. And as you will appreciate, as you spend hours and hours reading through this particular statute and trying to calculate things, how complicated this can be. I urge this committee to take immediate action on this so we can get it to the House floor and send it to our colleagues in the Senate. And with that, I closed. Chair Rexton.
Thank you, Rep. Beatty. This closes the hearing on House Bill 15. We will now look at House Bill 67. Representative Bertolio, will you open on your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Marta Bertolio, spelled B-E-R-T-O-G-L-I-O, and I represent House District 75, which is a large portion of Jefferson County, just south of here. House Bill 67 is brought to you by the request of the Teachers Retirement Board. This bill is normally heard in state administration because it's a pension bill, but is here, so here we go. The bill provides clarification and technical fixes to existing law regarding administration of the teacher retirement system in the following areas. Extra duty service that falls outside the school district's regular curriculum, co-curricular, or extracurricular programs, and that is not reportable to TRS on its own would be reportable when assigned to a school district teacher, teacher's aide, paraprofessional, or administrator for the purposes of student supervision. The term educational services capacity is defined and clarified by specifying the criteria applied by TRS in determining whether a position must be reported to TRS. TRS employers are required to report hours and wages for certain substitute teachers and part-time teachers' aides and paraprofessionals who have elected to defer membership until they work at least 210 hours in a fiscal year. This provision was requested by TRS employers to help them track these hours and avoid costly compliance errors for this subset of employees. The bill also incorporates recent IRS changes to the required minimum distribution ages and makes several clarifications and technical fixes in existing TRS law. Director Graham is here to explain the specifics of the bill and answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go with proponents. Director Graham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Sean Graham. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Teachers Retirement System, and I will just pass out, if I'm allowed, a handout that will help.
Please do.
All right, Madam Chair. So what's circulating around the table is just a section-by-section summary of our housekeeping bill. And I guess before I start, I'd like to thank Representative Bertolio for agreeing to carry this bill on behalf of the Teachers Retirement Board. As she stated, this bill really is what we call it our housekeeping bill. It is a bill that comes forward every 2 years to make things more clear in TRS statute and to comply with IRS qualification standards. And the one piece of this bill that relates to those IRS qualification standards is the required minimum distribution bill or distribution statute, which I'll get to here in just a little bit. That's section 4 and 6 of the bill. If everyone has the handout now, rather than go through the bill and point out line by line, I think I'll work off of the summary that I passed out. Section 1 deals with extra duty service, and that is service. What we're trying to do is add to extra duty service because it is already in statute, but make sure that it includes service that on its own usually isn't reportable to TRS for someone that's otherwise a TRS member. So what happens now currently is you could have a teacher or a teacher's aide who is also assigned like playground duty or lunch duty, and those tasks in and of themselves aren't truly educational services, at least they haven't been viewed as such in the past. And so when an employer would call to find out whether or not they report that to TRS or not, they were told, no, you don't report it to TRS. The problem with that is then those wages and potentially the service credit associated with those wages don't get reported anywhere. They don't get credit for them. So all we're saying is if for people that otherwise are TRS members, a teacher, a paraprofessional, a teacher's aide, an administrator, if they are assigned these other duties, that they should report them to TRS so they get the salary credit for them for calculation of their retirement benefit down the road. Section 2, 3, and 5 of the bill deals with current law. I mean, we're not changing anything about the substitute teachers, part-time teachers' aides, and paraprofessionals who have the option to opt in or out of TRS when they're first hired. Nothing about that changes. Under current law, if you are have never been a TRS member and you're going to substitute teach or be a part-time teacher's aide, you do get to make an election to either join TRS on day one or wait until you've worked at least 210 hours in a fiscal year. Once you hit that 210 hours in a fiscal year, you're required to be reported to TRS after that point and until you eventually either withdraw from the system or retire. What we're doing, and it came about at the request of our employers and specifically the MASBO group, the Montana Association of School Budget Officers, is we're going to provide them a means to track that in our reporting system. So in order for it to actually work, we need to require employers to report them from day one as non-contributing members of TRS, just so that we can keep track of them in our system electronically, and then we will tally up the hours as they're worked, and once they hit or exceed 210 hours the following month, they automatically will become an active member of the system. This is important and necessary because what has happened in districts where you have multiple districts that border one another, an individual could work for 2 or 3 or even more districts, and they might never work 210 hours for any single one of those districts in a fiscal year, but all combined, they do work more than 210 hours. And if we are not made aware of that until 5 or 6 years down the road, what happens is, we do our investigation, we determine, yes, you should have actually been reported to TRS 5 years ago, and so then all of the wages that have been paid to them between when they should have been reported and whenever we find out then are determined to be service not reported, and then the employer has to pay the contributions plus interest that should have been paid all along. So this really cleans that up. It provides automatic electronic tracking of those hours, and it doesn't cost the employers anything. They're just reporting those wages to us and the hours. They're not making contributions until they hit the 210 hours. The other piece of that, which is in Section 5, is that we have in statute a means for the individuals that opt out of TRS for that first 210 hours to down the road, if they do become an active member of the system, we allow them to purchase that service. There's no employer cost to that. The employee is the one who opted out, so they have to purchase it on their own. The changes that we did to that section of law are necessary because the way we have it set up in our system, you're never going to hit it perfectly at 210 hours is the only thing that wasn't reported. So we had to have a means to allow them, if they actually ended up at 240 hours before they were automatically flipped to active member status the next month, that they could purchase that full 240 hours. And again, that's 100% elective service purchase on the member's part. Section 3 of the bill deals with educational services capacity, and I actually might just point you to the bill for just a second because it'll make clear why we need this. So on page 7 of the bill, line 26, this is in current law. Our active membership statute speaks to the various positions that are reportable to TRS. Some of them are specifically named, like teacher, principal, district superintendent, so on and so forth. But when you look at line 26, it says, a person employed in a teaching or an educational services capacity by the Office of County Superintendent, Educational Cooperative, Public Institution of the State of Montana, the Montana State School for the Deaf and Blind, or a school district. So educational service capacity is a kind of broad term. TRS has utilized a fact sheet titled "Which Positions Are Reportable to TRS" for at least the last 8 years. It was not in place when I first got to TRS, but we've been using it for at least 8 years. And what we're doing is we're putting this language exactly the way it was is in our fact sheet into statute in section 3 of the bill, a little bit further along, and which would be on page, it starts on the bottom of page 10, and really it's on the top of page 11, and it's exactly the same language that I have in my summary. But what we're doing is making it clear for our employers and for our members that what we have determined is educational service capacity, and what will be required of them to report to TRS are folks that directly teach or instruct students, provide professional educationally related services that assist students in participating in and or receiving the full benefit of an educational program, individuals that evaluate the competencies and or the proper placement of students, determine or implement student-specific educational programs or plans, and or provides direct, indirect support for academic or behavior intervention, individuals that determine the proper curriculum and or educational standards applicable to the program, determines the appropriate educational instructional methodologies, selects or creates the instructional materials, and or trains teachers or other staff responsible for implementing the curriculum, standards, and methodology of the program. E would be directs, supervisors, or oversees the work of other individuals employed in an educational instructional services capacity. And F is the primary administrator of an employer entity that provides educational services, or the primary administrator of an educational program of such an employer. So we do have specific guidelines that we have made available to our TRS employers for, like I said, the last 8 years. It would be helpful, I think, for everyone for this language to be in statute, and that's what the TRS board is asking to do, is to put that directly in the state law. Section 4 and 6 of the bill, this deals with the Internal Revenue Service code requirements. Secure 2.0 changed the required minimum distribution ages, and so if you were to look at that, it would be, it's really on page, or section 6. And this is the federal law that passed almost 2 years ago now, but we do need this incorporated into our state law. It used to only be, you had to take a required minimum distribution if you turned 70 and a half and were no longer working, but now they've changed those and extended out those dates based on when you were born. So the exact dates and ages are right there on the bottom of page 14 in your bill. It's 72 if you were born between July 1, 49 and December 31st, 1950. It's 73 if you were born between January 1, 1951 and December 31st, 1959, or it's 75 if you're born on or after January 1, 1960. And just as a really briefly, the reason that there are required minimum distributions are for a defined benefit plan like TRS is because your contributions as you're working come to TRS on a tax deferred basis. the federal government wants to tax those at some point, and so if you're no longer working, they require you to start taking distributions based on your age and these dates that are in the bill. And then finally, Section 7 of the bill deals with recalculation of benefits for a previously disabled member that returns to active status and subsequently retires. This is just clarification. Unfortunately, what's in current law is almost indecipherable what it actually means. So what we have in here at the end of your bill here, pages 15 and 16, are how TRS would calculate a subsequent benefit for an individual that applied for and was approved for disability, and then at some point after that, they decided to go back to work in a TRS reportable position and they earned more than they were allowed to earn. They would get returned to active member status. They would start accruing additional service credit, and then at some point down the road, when they went to re-retire for a second time, we have brought we have clarified the language of exactly how TRS will calculate that benefit for them at that point. In the 12 years I've been at TRS, we've never had somebody actually do this yet, but it is entirely possible, and there's someone working right now that it actually will apply to at some point in the future. So essentially what it would be is the lesser of our total recalculation of their benefit, where you have whatever service they worked prior to their disability application, added to the service that they worked subsequent to their return to active work and eventual final retirement. You would, instead of having 10 years in one pot and 5 years in another, you add all 15 together, you just do a total recalculation. Or you do the second benefit calculation like it applies to all other TRS working retirees that go back to work in an active member status, where you have your original benefit, let's say just for example, it was based on 15 years of service, and then you came back to work and you worked an additional 5 years under the second benefit rule. That second benefit is calculated completely separate from your original benefit that was suspended, and then the two are added together. So this just makes it very clear for anyone, TRS staff included, of how that benefit would be calculated upon a subsequent retirement for a disabled member who still qualifies for disability. With that, Madam Chair, the final section is just the effective date, so all of these provisions would go into effect as of July 1, 2025, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions about the bill as you have them. Thank you. We ask for a due pass.
Thank you, Director Graham. Other proponents?
Chair Exton, for the record again, Rob Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N. I stand actually today on behalf of the CAMPS, the Coalition of Advocates for Montana's Public Schools. That includes the School Administrators of Montana, the School Boards Association, the Rural Education Association, school business officials, and the Quality Education Coalition. We stand in support of House Bill 67, and speaking broadly, I won't go into a lot of detail because I know Director Graham explained the bill fairly clearly, but I will tell you that there's some pieces of this bill that we really do like. The part of the bill about extra duty service is a good thing. I see many of you as being former teachers or current teachers in the room. You know, there's all kinds of extra duties that happen in a school: playground duty, curriculum work, after school duties. So clarifying that those duties, all that you receive pay for, all actually go into the system is a good thing. So we do like that piece of that. The other one about educational services capacity. In this day and age, there's quite a few different jobs in schools. Sometimes they're created by grants or COVID money. You might have instructional coaches that are created from a grant. You may have a dean of students that's created through some other program. And so with all these new jobs in schools, sometimes it's unclear whether or not they qualify for TRS. I know TRS has always been really good at giving us a guideline around that, but it'd be good to see that in state law so that it's clear when you add a position in a school district that it does qualify for TRS. So with that, we appreciate Representative Bertolio for bringing the bill, and we do encourage you to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Other proponents? Proponents online?
Madam Chair, there are no proponents online.
Okay, opponents in the room? Opponents online?
Madam Chair, there are no opponents online.
Informational witnesses? In the room or online? Okay, questions from the committee? Representative Gregg.
Madam Chair, question for Director Graham.
Madam Chair, Representative Gregg.
Yes, Graham, question for you about the TRS. I'm a little confused about the 210-hour threshold. Why 210 hours and why automatically require membership? I'm just genuinely curious. If you wouldn't mind just going, give me a quick rundown on that.
So, Madam Chair, Representative Gregg, so the 210 hours represents 37-hour days. I can't speak for sure why that exemption exists in state law, other than just to say there are quite a few substitute teachers that work, multiple years that never hit that 210-hour threshold. So they would be contributing on a very, very small salary for a very, very long time and never actually qualify for a benefit, because the service credit that you need to vest in the system and qualify for a benefit is 5 years. And so what 210 hours represents is being full-time for 1 month, essentially. And so what's in current law, and we're really not changing anything about that other than we're trying to give employers a mechanism or a way to track those hours for people that have opted out, is the 210-hour threshold. Once you hit it, then you're required to become a member. Those substitute teachers and part-time teachers, aides, and paraprofessionals are the only ones in current law right now that have the option to that can opt out. Everyone else is required participation from day one, if that makes sense. I think that answered your question.
Madam Chair, follow-up?
Follow-up.
Now, if someone does choose to opt out, what does that mean, and what are the options there?
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, so what it means depends on the individual and how much they actually end up working. So if they opt out and they never hit the 210-hour threshold, the only thing that means is that whatever salary they earn for less than less than 200 hours they worked is not reported to TRS. They don't contribute to TRS, so they have no membership in TRS. Once they hit that 210 threshold in a fiscal year, then anything from the 210 beyond is reported to TRS, and they now are an active member of the system. So if they opt out, there's a chance that they may never qualify and never ever be reported to TRS. What the provisions we're asking for, the changes to the law we're asking for would require, though, is even if they opt out, that the employers report the wages and the hours worked to TRS so that we can keep track of them across multiple employers.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions by the committee? Representative Isley, is that right?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Make sure.
Mr. Graham again. So I just want to clarify what you just said, in that once, whether they're a substitute or para, once they reach that 210 hours, then they can't opt out anymore. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Representative, Isley, that is correct. Once they become an active member of the system, then they're required to be reported from that point on, unless or until they eventually withdraw from TRS or they qualify for retirement benefit. But yes, you're correct.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yes, follow-up.
So, Mr. Graham, this is on a little different topic. I'm just curious as to, and you might not be able to answer this, why this is coming in front of the Education Committee instead of State Ad.
Madam Chair, Representative Isley, you're correct. I cannot answer that question. But I will say, I was here for your committee introductions all to yourself, and it's not terrible that it came to this committee because many of you do have teaching experience, and many of you actually are retired teachers members. So
absolutely, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Essman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Mr. Graham, I think I'll start there. Madam Chair, Mr. Graham, I am probably one of the few people on this committee who is not an educator and has never been an educator and knew I could never be an educator. So my question is, on the first part of the bill, Section 1, the extra duty service, being very naive about the educational payroll system, does this mean that if you're a teacher and you teach during the day, but then you get assigned playground duty for the lunch hour, or you're serving in the lunchroom during lunch hour, is that a different pay grade, or why is this all separated out? I don't understand why we even have to make this distinction.
So, Madam Chair, Representative Essman, yes, that's exactly the problem. It may not be 100% across the board for all contracts, but we see many contracts that are just for the teaching position, and then these other extra duty are either done through a stipend, separate stipend, or as an hourly rate of pay. So oftentimes like playground duty, lunch duty, they're an hourly paid position. So maybe you're teaching for 5 hours a day as a part-time teacher, but then you're also getting paid hourly for things like playground duty, crossing aid, lunch duty, etc.
Madam Chair, follow up?
Follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Graham, is that your right title, Director?
Yes.
Okay. So this is so coming from the private sector, trying to figure this out. How do you keep track of that? Well, first of all, when did that start? Has it always been that way? Like since I was in school in the dark ages, I don't think it was that way. I think the teachers came to school, they got paid, they did their job, and they went home. So when did we start deciding that teacher pay was different from playground pay and lunchroom pay? And why did we do that and make it it has to be an absolute accounting nightmare. I know we're not here to fix it today, but just so I can get this clear in my mind, it would be very helpful to understand that.
So, Madam Chair, Representative Essman, I can't speak to the history of it. I mean, I've been the director at TRS for a little over 12 years now, and it was certainly like this before I got there, and likely for quite some time. I think what you have is you have contract teachers, right? And they could be a half-time contract, they could be a full-time contract, but then you also have all these other duties, and coaching isn't a great example. I'm the head wrestling coach for Capitol High School, and I actually get a coaching stipend. I'm not otherwise a TRS member, but that is completely separate from any of your teaching contracts. So as far as how school districts account for it, they do a pretty good job of it, believe it or not. They report monthly to TRS whether you're full-time FTE, either on an FTE basis or the hourly basis, along with your wages each month to TRS. The way that we come across these typically is when someone goes to retire, we ask for all of their contracts for the years that make up their average final compensation, plus the 1 year prior to that. And so what happens is we'll get the contracts, what the contracts add up to versus what was actually reported to TRS don't match, oftentimes because additional things were reported, and we'll ask, well, what's this extra $2,500 for? And it may be that they forgot to send us a stipend for things like coaching or being a club advisor, et cetera, or it could be hourly pay for doing playground duty or lunch duty, so on and so forth.
Any other questions for the bill? Mr. Elverin?
Madam Chair, just a question potentially for legal services, just on placement of part of the definition in the chapter. Sorry.
Madam Chair, Representative?
Madam Chair,
You can call me Laura.
Laura.
Yep.
the definition of education services capacity, which is included at the end of 192302, that definition says it applies to that section. Beginning of this bill, we have the definitions in the entire chapter. Is there any reason it's in that section and not included in the entire chapter? Is there a separate definition, or, sorry, I just have a question on the placement.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Alvarum and Director Graham, I'm not super familiar with Title 19. My guess is that that term that's being defined in 1920-302, if that's where it is, that's the only section that that term is used in.
Follow-up, Madam Chair.
One more follow-up.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair and Laura, it does look like in 1920-101, page 4, line 9, they are using, in other definitions, education services capacity, but then it's not defined until we get all the way later in the section.
Mm-hmm. Madam Chair, Representative Alvarum, just looking at it, it's just a little bit, maybe just a little bit of a funky situation where you already have an existing definition, which is part of the definitions that apply to the entire chapter, that included the definition for extra duty service. And now extra duty service is being expanded to include, because the additional language being added to the definition includes the educational services capacity term in the definition, but I'm going to guess that throughout the statutes it's only used in that other statute, so instead of adding it to the definitions for the entire chapter, they defined the term where it was being used and then had to circle back in the extra duty service definition and referred to it there. But perhaps Director Graham has some better insight.
If I may, Madam Chair, I do. So we worked closely with the drafters on this language. The reason that we wanted to put educational service capacity in 302 is because 302 is where you go to look to find out who is reportable to TRS. So we were asked by the drafter whether or not they could move it and put it in regular definitions. And the problem with regular definitions is people don't always read them and review them closely. Where if you are interested in who is required to be an active member of TRS and you go to 302, it's going to be very clear that if you work in an educational service capacity, it's defined in 302.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Bertolio, you want to close on your bill, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Aren't you glad we brought a pension bill to education on a Friday? I just, on behalf of the Teacher Retirement Board, I asked for a due pass on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Bertolio. We have a nice little sheet on school funding. It has two sides to it, so why don't you pass that out, Representative Gregg, or find some folks to help you? That closes, what? That closes House Bill 67.
Can I address the committee briefly?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The handout looks like it is the kind of what I call the building blocks for the school district general fund. It looks like it's the most current fiscal year 25 version. I also wanted to ask the committee, so I have compiled a set of links that includes the links to LFD's school funding library, the Understanding School Finance document that Paul Taylor referred to, the inflationary formula statute. I can email that to the committee, or if you think it would be easier, I could also set up a team for the committee in Teams and then drop the links there. Does the committee have a preference which would be easier for you all to access and use?
Madam Chair, I might.
Yeah, Representative Thain.
Yeah, I might suggest a Teams channel just simply because then we have it archived and can refer to it at any point in time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's great. I will work on setting that up for everybody. And the other, Madam Chair, the other point, I forgot to mention this at our organizational meeting. Assuming the committee will be taking executive action later today, I do have extra copies of the motions and committee brochure if any of you want to grab one from me. So, thank you.
I would also add that we need to have current contact information if it's anything different than what is posted on your legislative bio. We would need that information should we need to contact you for a variety of reasons. Can we just maybe send a sheet around? Thank you. We just have one more bill here. Representative Romano, do you want to open on your bill?
Are you going to gavel me in?
There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Melissa Romano, R-O-M-A-N-O for the record. I represent House District 80 here in Helena. And today I have for you a very clean, simple bill, I hope, House Bill 24. And I am quite certain that Mr. Taylor in the back will be able to clear up anything that I don't. So this bill is coming to you from the recommendation of the House Ed Interim Committee. It did pass out of there unanimously, and it does a couple of different things. And so I'm going to tell you what it does and try to direct you in your bill of where you can find those things. So the first thing that it does, it's amending sections 20-1301, 20-3-326, and 20-7-117 MCA. And those are amended to clarify that students enrolled in kindergarten programs are to be counted for A and B purposes based on the number of aggregate hours attending, and that students may attend half or full time, and that districts offer kindergarten to meet aggregate hour requirements. And you can see those things amended on page 1. You'll see it again on page 5 and at the top of page 6, I believe. The second thing that you're going to see is it's going to amend section 20-9-205 MCA. And that's amending the powers or the duties of the county superintendent. And it's amended to broaden the meaning of estimated increases to A and B under section 20-9-131 MCA from item 1C, or anticipated increases in A and B associated with the closure of a private or other public school district, or in a neighborhood school district, to the entire section. And that's at the bottom of page 2. Section 20-9-311 and 20-9-313 MCA are modified to remove references to the transitioning of districts to full-time kindergarten programs for adjustments to A and B funding and budget amendment adjustment purposes that were related to Senate Bill 2 of the 2007 special legislative session. And that's found on page 13. And also on the bottom of page 6 and on 8. I apologize for the jumping around. But that is, in a nutshell, what it does. Clear as mud. But I am confident that Mr. Taylor can help clear up anything that I didn't. And with that, Madam Chair, I will have a seat.
Okay, can we have proponents for House Bill 24? Proponents online?
Madam Chair, there are no proponents online.
Opponents? Opponents online?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Informational witnesses?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, once again, my name is Paul Taylor. I work for the Office of Public Instruction. Frequently, I don't make a follow-up statement after that, but in this case, I think I'm going to bridge that gap and attempt to remain informational for this. The history on the bill being brought forward is associated with interim committee interim committee study of things that are occurring. What happens during the interim is frequently myself, because we look at law quite frequently, and bill writers who I work collectively with, we identify things in statute that are antiquated or could be streamlined or no longer needed. And what happens is frequently we will bring those to the attention of Education Subcommittee, and then they'll bring that forward as a committee bill. So the three things that Representative Romano made mention of are doing a couple things, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. Section law said at one point that students enrolled in kindergarten programs were to be enrolled as half or full-time. There's a point in the state's history in which we only funded half-time kindergarten. About 20 years ago, they expanded the program to be half or full-time. The clutter, I suppose, would be that they continued to refer to the kindergarten participation as half or full. What the law does, or what this bill does in part, is to clarify that a parent has the right to enroll their student in kindergarten at either half or full-time, and we tried to find a way to unclutter the situation with how those students are funded. Our current funding situation is that when you enroll a student, the student can be enrolled for half or full-time or for pretty much other numbers of hours, but the funding of those students are associated with what is termed aggregate hours. The aggregate hours are quarter, half, three-quarter, or full. And so the bill is intending to separate and clarify that a parent still has the right to enroll their student as half or full-time kindergarten, but the funding of those students will be based on those aggregate hours. Another thing that the bill is intending to do here is, at the time at which the full-time kindergarten program was initiated, again, approximately 20 years ago, there was incentivization for allowance for the kindergarten shifting from half to full when you apply the calculation of A and B to the 3-year averaging. You could take the increase of A and B and take those pieces of increase and apply those to the 2 years earlier so that the 3-year averaging was somewhat normalized for the calculation. Now move forward 20 years, and there is virtually no districts across the state that have solely half-time programs. And so the incentivization is somewhat of an artifact that we're looking to just clear out of there. And I know I'm sounding more like a proponent, but I'm hopeful that I'm coming off as just informational on this information. So, Madam Chair, thank you.
Questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Nikolakakos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Mr. Taylor. Sorry.
Madam Chair, Representative Nikolakakos.
Will this then also affect our early literacy targeted, because they are?
Madam Chair, Representative, no. The early literacy is a three-pronged formula that is targeted to what they term Jumpstart enrolled students who are pre-K. and also situations where early literacy programs for qualified students also garner A and B for classroom participation. The third prong is for homeschooled students and doesn't really run through the OPI quite so tightly through a formula mechanism. This particular bill does not affect that in any regard whatsoever, and in fact, this bill is truly language cleanup only and has no fiscal impact. Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, follow-up?
Follow-up?
Or might be a new question. Madam Chair, Mr. Taylor, would this affect any of that special ed early kids that are in our school?
Oh, yeah, Madam Chair, Representative. No, this will not affect that circumstance either, and I understand that there's a different bill being brought forward for addressing that situation, but no, this does not impact that. This was truly intended as a language cleanup bill only, Madam Chair.
Any other questions by committee? Okay, this closes House Bill 24. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to? Apologize. Yeah, I'm still a little rusty here. Just to inform you, we're going to hold off on EA of 15. And we just have a little cleanup to do on House Bill 28, and we can have executive action on that bill. And I don't think it's going to be a horrible, long, drawn-out thing. I believe there is an amendment, so could we have Ms. Kipe go over the amendment with us?
Are we going straight to EA?
I think we can do that.
Okay.
Maybe, Ms. Kipe, could you just go over this bill, just to review it? And then essentially, we'll start by making a motion.
Sure, Madam Chair and committee members, House Bill 28 is brought by Representative Beatty on behalf of the Board of Public Education. Just as a brief overview, this was the board requested the language in order to help clean up some of the process in approving the public charter schools, which was brand new legislation out of the last session.
Okay. Representative Gregg, I need you to make a motion.
Yes, and then
I move that House Bill 28 do pass.
I move that the House Bill. I move that House Bill 28 do pass.
Okay. Do we have discussion? Representative Bertolio?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move an amendment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move amendment number HB 0028.001.001 to House Bill 28.
Okay. Ms. Kipe, can you explain the amendment?
Madam Chair, I will do my best. The amendment is also brought at the request of the sponsor of the bill. And basically what the intention of the amendment is to do is the Public Charter School Act provides for two different routes that public charter school can be opened. The first route, which is what the vast majority of them have been, is through the work of the local school board. However, there is the Route 2 option if the local school, if a group of interested stakeholders brings the idea to the school board declines to go forward with it itself, then that group can go through the Route 2 option, create their own public charter school district. And so what the amendment is doing is for those Route 2 options, which would be a brand new entity, in order to have sufficient funding in the first year, the amendment would provide that those new charter school districts are eligible for the per A and B entitlement. And then if you look on the third page of the amendment, the Indian Education for All, the data for achievement, and the special ed allowable cost payments. The amendment also provides that these payments would be based on the estimated number of A and B that would be attending that new charter district in the first year. And if the application overestimates the number of A and B that will who actually show up in the first year, then there's a provision for the state to claw back that overfunding, Madam Chair. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, is there any discussion on the amendment? My understanding is that this amendment was to allow for that other entity to be represented other than the public charter school. Am I correct on that one?
So what this is doing, Madam Chair, is it's ensuring that that brand new public charter district has sufficient funding.
Okay.
The way that the public charter schools that are created by the local school board are funded, they're only accessing the basic entitlement in that first year.
Okay.
But if you had, as I understand it, like if you had a smaller district and you were anticipating fewer than the 70 that's required for the threshold for the high school district, I believe, you could potentially not have any other funding for that district. And so this is a way to provide funding for the district that doesn't have the funding that the public charter school through the local school district has, Madam Chair. I'm not explaining that very well, I'm sorry.
Might be Friday. Questions by the Representatives Committee? Do you have any questions?
I might have a question.
Representative Isley?
Madam Chair, I think I'll try Laura again. So in some senses, though, this is kind of a little bit of a major change to that bill that was passed before in the way that they could obtain funding to start that program if they're not under their local board. Is that a correct assumption?
Madam Chair, Representative Isley, I don't know if it's fair for me to characterize it as a major change. What I guess maybe what I can add is that for the programs that are started by the local school board, the students that are counted as the A and B for that are already included in that school district's budget. And so, and the budgets are calculated based on looking back a year. And so those students are already accounted for in that school district's budget. Whereas if you go the Route 2 and you're creating a brand new little district for the public charter district, there's no history to look back on and no prior years A and B to be able to count to generate that per student funding. And so this is a way to try and bridge that gap, and then going forward, the charter district would be then following the same parameters, looking back to their prior years A and B in order to calculate the current year's budget, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Question? Yes, Representative Romano.
Well, I don't know if this is allowable, Chair Rexton, but I do see Director Flynn in the audience, and I don't know if she would be able to provide any sort of clarification.
Director Flynn, would you like to maybe speak to that? You probably don't have a copy of the amendment, or do you?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. McCall Flynn, last name spelled F-L-Y-N-N, Executive Director of the Board of Public Education. I am aware of the amendment. Representative Beatty did bring it to us and ask if we were amenable to it. This is not something that we think will substantially change the sort of cleanup provisions of this bill. To Representative Isley's question, this was never contemplated in the bill initially, and we don't have any. Currently, we don't have any public charter school districts, so it wouldn't necessarily be a different way of funding these schools. It's just that we're doing it on the front end instead of the back end. So that's why we're putting it in the bill, just to clarify when they would be getting the funding, because it's not in there anywhere else. And to maybe answer one of the questions from earlier about why this is coming, and it's different than the schools that we are seeing right now that are public charter schools. And I think Ms. Sinke-Kipe did a great job of answering the question, but really a lot of it is that these new public charter school districts may not have any funding when they first open. You're only going to get funded with that basic entitlement as if you meet those thresholds of 71, 21, 41. And if a public charter school district wants to open and they're only going to start with maybe 2-3 grades, and they may not meet that threshold in their first or second year, they're not going to see any funding at all. And so it's really putting them at a disadvantage because they wouldn't have any funding to actually do any of the good work that they were approved to do as a charter school. And so I very much understand Representative Beatty bringing this amendment. And frankly, it's something that we hadn't even thought about. And like I said, it wasn't contemplated in the bill. So I think it's a good addition, and we're certainly fine with it at the Board of Public Ed. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me a little latitude.
Any further questions by the committee? Okay. Representative Gregg? Well, you've got to we've got to add the amendment to the bill. So you just need to simply add the amendment to the bill.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a movement to amend, for an amendment HB 0028.001.001. To the bill.
What bill?
To bill, sorry guys, HB 28.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Do we need a roll call or a voice vote? Voice? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? I'm opposed. Okay.
I'm opposed.
All right. So the rest are ayes. Did you get that, Caitlin? Okay. So the amendment passes. So it is now added to the bill. So now we will vote on the entire bill. So you need to make I move that House Bill 28 as amended do pass.
I make a motion for amendment 0028.
No, you don't need to do that.
Okay.
Okay. I move.
I move
that
House Bill 28 do pass.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay. Let's do a roll call on this. Oh, discussion, sorry. Okay. Now roll call.
Representative Bertoglio. Aye. Representative Nikolakakos.
Aye.
Representative Essman.
Aye.
Representative Isley.
Aye.
Aye.
Representative Deming.
No.
Representative Seekins-Crow.
No.
Representative Elverum.
Aye.
Representative Thane.
Aye.
Representative Strand.
Aye.
Representative Tillman.
Aye.
Representative Overstreet.
No.
Representative Romano.
Aye.
Representative Gregg.
No.
Representative Rexton.
Aye. What is the vote total?
Madam Chair, the vote total is 11 aye, 4 nay.
Okay, the bill passes and we'll move to the floor. And that is all we're going to do today. So unless anyone has anything else to add, this committee is adjourned.